No one noticed the dog had stopped breathing. Not literally, Ace was still alive. But as Officer Rachel Hayes stepped out of the cruiser and let her German Shepherd K9 out on leash, something about him shifted. He stiffened, ears forward, tail frozen, and then, with no warning, he pulled sharply toward the back of the yard. This was supposed to be a routine odor complaint. A leaky pipe. Maybe something died under the porch. Willow Glen had plenty of raccoons. The house had been empty for years, foreclosure, mold, and the occasional teenager sneaking in for dares. But Ace wasn't sniffing trash. He was locked in on something buried. And Rachel had learned long ago to stop questioning a dog like him. You don't second-guess instinct sharpened by years of search and rescue. You follow it. He circled an overgrown slab of concrete, tail lowered, nose twitching like radar. Not alert like for narcotics. Not happy like when he found a missing child in the snow last winter. No, this was his graveyard posture. Rachel's stomach tightened. "What you got, boy?" Ace stepped back, growled low, and Saturday, that was his alert. Something was under that slab. If this kind of mystery keeps you hooked, hit that subscribe button now, and don't miss what Ace uncovers next. Sometimes, it's not what the dog finds that's haunting, it's why it was ever buried at all. The sun was already dropping behind the ridge when Rachel got Public Works on the line. By the time 2 county guys showed up with pry bars and flashlights, she had the back perimeter taped off and Ace secured in the shade, panting but vigilant. The concrete wasn't thick, maybe a septic lid once sealed decades ago. Now it looked like a forgotten piece of some long-abandoned system. A patch job, cheap and rushed. One of the workers groaned as he wedged the edge open. "Smells like something's been stewing under here a while." Rachel stayed quiet. She crouched low, heart pacing ahead of her breath. She wasn't one to get jumpy. 22 years on the force, 12 with K9. But this didn't feel routine. A crack split across the cement, and a pocket of stench punched through the air like rotted eggs and bleach. The younger worker gagged and turned away. "Jesus, that ain't a raccoon." The senior guy stepped back, swearing. "You sure we shouldn't call hazmat?" Rachel leaned closer. A black plastic wrap, maybe tarp, floated just beneath the surface. Something inside it held shape, contained, waited. And then her eyes locked onto the edge of something brown, rounded, and hollow. A boot, old leather, half submerged in sludge, still tied. She didn't need forensics to tell her this wasn't from last week. This was old, and someone had gone through trouble to hide it under layers of cement, filth, and time. She stood up slowly, reached for her radio. "This is Officer Hayes. I need a forensics unit and crime scene team at 24 Sycamore. Possible remains human, possibly more than one." The 2 men backed away without another word. Ace hadn't moved. He just watched, eyes sharp and still. Rachel waited as the first forensic van pulled up. She kept thinking about the property. The address rang familiar. Sycamore Street. The corner house with the rose bushes that never bloomed. She'd driven by it for years, always meant to check on it after that foreclosure back in 2019. Then something flickered in her memory. A name. Ron Porter, the school janitor. Went missing 6 years ago. No signs of foul play. No leads. No one even filed a report for days. Just vanished. And this was the house he rented back then. She walked back to Ace, crouched beside him. He didn't wag his tail. He just leaned into her, calm and waiting. "You brought me back here for a reason, huh?" He licked her hand. Rachel looked back at the now exposed pit. The tarp still hadn't been moved, and already the weight of it, whatever it was, pressed down on her chest like a wet blanket. Maybe it was Ron, or maybe it was someone else nobody missed. But if Ace had caught the scent, there was a reason. The coroner's team was halfway through processing the scene when Rachel stepped around to the side fence and spotted a small break in the wood, just big enough for a child to squeeze through. A beer can and a cracked phone case lay half buried in leaves. Teenagers had been using this place, maybe even recently. God help them if they'd ever opened that pit. She picked up the phone case, faded pink with a cartoon heart, the kind middle schoolers used. She made a mental note to check missing persons from nearby counties. Back near the van, a crime scene tech waved her over. "We've got more than one tarp, ma'am. At least two. Could be two sets of remains. Maybe more." Rachel nodded slowly. "Keep going. Anything you find, bag it and mark it. No mistakes." As she turned to glance at Ace, she saw he was no longer lying down. He stood, tail still, ears twitching, nose to the wind, like he was already sensing something deeper, something still waiting to be found. The forensic lights cast long shadows across the backyard, making the scene look like something out of a documentary. Neighbors had started gathering behind the yellow tape, quiet voices, folded arms, some taking photos, most just staring, as if hoping to recognize something, anything, that might make sense of the horror uncovered just beneath their own neighborhood. Rachel didn't look at them. Her focus stayed on the man kneeling beside the pit, dusted in powdered gloves and grim experience. The coroner, Dr. Lewis, had been with the county for 30 years. If bones could talk, he was the one who'd listen. "So far," he said without looking up, "we've got one full adult skeleton. Partial remains of a smaller frame, possibly juvenile. No tissue left. Time and weather did their job. We'll confirm sex and age range after reconstruction." Rachel nodded. She didn't need it confirmed. "Not yet. Anything with them?" "Yeah, this." He held up a corroded wristwatch in a sealed bag. "Stopped at 3:17 a.m. Rusted out, but the glass is still mostly intact. Old school design. Could have been sitting there for years." That number hit her like a slow punch. Back when Ron Porter disappeared, she'd read through his personnel file at the school. There was a report filed against him, something vague and procedural. Unauthorized access to student records after hours. It meant nothing at the time, just another forgotten employee nobody followed up on. But the timestamp on the report, 3:17 a.m. She looked down at Ace. He was lying still beside the van, chin on his paws, eyes open and alert, watching, waiting. He'd sensed something no one else had. Just like that night in the mountains 3 winters ago, when a missing girl had crawled into a collapsed culvert. No one else even knew she was alive except Ace. Rachel drew a slow breath and stepped away from the pit. That evening, after the techs had cleared out and the bodies were on their way to the lab, Rachel took a detour down Oak Ridge Drive. The houses here were older, modest, built in the 50s. All single-story, with chain-link fences and wind chimes hanging in porches. It was the kind of neighborhood where people knew the names of each other's dogs better than their kids. She parked across from a small brown house with overgrown hedges and a porch swing that had seen better years. Miss Evelyn Callahan opened the door before Rachel even knocked. "I saw the lights," she said, soft but steady. "They said you were there." Rachel nodded. "It's not confirmed yet, but it looks like Ron." Miss Callahan's fingers curled tightly around the edge of the doorframe. "I figured it might be. You were the last person to speak with him, weren't you?" "I was." She stepped aside and gestured toward the old floral couch. "Tea?" Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "Please." The living room hadn't changed in 2 decades. Same curtains, same porcelain angel figurines, same scent of cedar and lemon furniture polish. The walls were lined with framed class photos, kids in red shirts, little paper diplomas. Bright, toothy smiles frozen in time. Evelyn came back with 2 mugs and a matching plate of butter cookies. "He was a kind man," she said. "Not warm, but decent. You know the type. He remembered kids' birthdays, cleaned up without being asked, took his lunch outside so he wouldn't interrupt teachers' break time. Did anything seem off before he disappeared?" Evelyn looked down at her tea. "He was scared." Rachel leaned in slightly. "Of what?" "I don't know. He never said directly. But he told me about a week before he vanished that someone had been following him home. Not every night, just sometimes. Said he thought maybe he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to. Something about one of the older boys in detention. He didn't say more." Rachel stayed quiet. Evelyn's voice dropped even lower. "He asked if I'd ever had the feeling that you were about to disappear. Like your body was still there, but the rest of you was already fading." Rachel felt a chill rise under her collar. He left his lunchbox on his desk that day, Evelyn added. He never left it behind. After the visit, Rachel drove back to the precinct. She needed to pull Ron Porter's old file, not just the employment record, the full incident history. Anything that had been scrubbed or stored under internal. She suspected now that not everything had been entered into the system. The night shift officer gave her a look when she asked for the archives. Late night digging, Hayes? Can't sleep. The records room was cold, dusty, the kind of quiet that made your ears ring. She found Ron's file buried between two mislabeled boxes, neither of which had anything to do with school staff. Someone had tried to bury it under noise. Inside, a copy of his background check. 2 notes from the principal at the time, Everett Miles. A single yellowing incident form with no follow-up, accessed building after hours, no security footage available, and 1 photo, a group shot of the school staff, dated the spring before Ron disappeared. In the back row, Ron, looking serious as always. Next to him, Principal Miles, smiling politely. And between them, a boy, maybe 15, close-cropped hair, faded bruise on his cheek. The boy had no name on the photo, but Rachel knew where she'd seen him. In the missing persons database, Sean Mercer, still unsolved, still listed as a runaway. Rachel closed the file slowly. Ace would be waiting in the car. The night was long. The truth was buried, but not forgotten. Not anymore. Rachel sat in the precinct's archive room longer than she intended, the silence broken only by the low hum of the fluorescent lights above and the occasional shuffle of pages. It smelled like cardboard and dust, like time had settled in and decided to stay. The photo in her hand didn't shake, but her stomach turned slowly, like a pot left to simmer too long on the stove. That boy in the back row, Sean Mercer. He hadn't been on anyone's radar in years. His file was barely more than a footnote. Runaway, age 15, left home voluntarily. No further investigation. No follow-up interviews. No neighborhood canvass. No alert. The system moved on. And now his face was here, caught between Ron Porter and Principal Miles in a photo meant to celebrate staff unity. Only the boy didn't look like he belonged. He looked like he'd been placed there on purpose, stiff and haunted, with the faint mark of a bruise across his cheek, barely visible behind grainy ink. Rachel slid the photo into a folder and tucked it under her arm. By morning, she was sitting in an old Ford repair shop on the south edge of town, sipping burnt coffee out of a foam cup, while Ace waited in the back seat, engine idling. A mechanic with grease-stained hands and a tired jawline stood across from her. "Sean Mercer?" she asked. The man didn't answer right away. He leaned back, wiping his hands with a red rag, eyes narrowing like he was reading her for motive. "Yeah," he said eventually. "I'm Sean. What's this about?" Rachel kept her tone light. "I found your name connected to someone I'm investigating. Ron Porter. From the middle school. You knew him?" He looked down. Not angry, not surprised, just older than his face. "He was the janitor," Sean muttered. Kept to himself. "Wasn't a bad guy. You disappeared around the same time he did." Sean didn't answer. "Your file said you ran away. No one ever confirmed where you went." "I stayed with my uncle in Dayton," he said quietly. "No one came looking. Not even my mom. Figured that told me what I needed to know." Rachel nodded slowly. "I think Ron was trying to help you," she said. Sean looked at her then. Really looked. "You don't know what it was like back then," he said. "That school, there were things people didn't talk about. You said you're investigating? You should be careful. Some of those people still walk free." She pulled out the photo. "You remember this?" He took it, studied it for a long time, then handed it back. He didn't belong in that picture either. They made him stand there, told him it would look better if he cooperated. "Who's they?" Sean's lips pressed into a line. "The ones who smiled too much. The ones who made the rules and never followed them. You're not a kid anymore, Sean." "No," he said, "but the fear doesn't age with you. It just settles deeper." That afternoon, Rachel returned to the property on Sycamore with a warrant and a team. The backyard had been covered in plastic sheeting, and the hole reinforced with supports while excavation continued. So far, 2 sets of remains had been confirmed. 1 adult, 1 child. She stood at the edge of the pit while the crew carefully unearthed layers of soil, each shovel of dirt a step closer to something or someone left to rot in silence. Ace stood beside her, unmoving. One of the techs waved. "Got something else?" Rachel stepped closer, watching as they lifted out a dented lunchbox. It was old, metal, the kind with cartoon heroes printed on the lid faded from time and rust. Inside were 2 small bones and a folded piece of paper, sealed in a sandwich bag. The handwriting was still visible. "If you're reading this, then I didn't make it." Rachel swallowed hard. The note was signed, Ron P. Back at her desk, Rachel stared at the note under evidence glass. It wasn't just a goodbye, it was a confession, a warning, a cry for help never delivered. In the note, Ron detailed seeing things no adult should ignore. He referenced someone in authority using power to hurt children and expressed fear that someone knows I've found out. He didn't name names, but he left enough for someone to follow. Rachel closed the file slowly, breathing deep. Her fingers brushed Ace's ear. He looked up at her, quiet and steady. "You knew this was bigger," she said softly. "Didn't you?" He blinked once. She looked over at the map on her wall. Red pins marked the school, the Mercer home, the foreclosed house, a triangle, all leading back to one place, the school basement. No one had ever checked it. No one ever asked what else Ron saw. Rachel grabbed her keys and stood. "Come on, Ace," she whispered. "Let's finish what he started." That evening, they pulled up outside the now renovated school. The lights were off, the parking lot empty. She'd already gotten approval from the superintendent. There was no alarm, no one scheduled to be inside until Monday. As she and Ace walked the quiet hallways, memories surfaced. She'd been here years ago for a DARE talk. The floors still smelled like cleaning solution. Bulletin boards were plastered with class photos and lunch calendars, the kind of place meant to feel safe. Down in the boiler room, the air changed. Ace's ears twitched. He moved forward without command, nose to the floor, then to the wall. Rachel stepped closer, running her fingers along the paint. A faint seam. She pressed. The panel gave way. Darkness yawned behind it. She clicked on her flashlight, and what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Not just storage, not just a hiding place. A room, small, sealed, soundproofed, with the name Tyler Mercer etched into the back of the door in jagged letters. Rachel stood motionless in the doorway of the hidden room, the narrow beam of her flashlight trembling just slightly in her grip. The dust in the air caught the light like floating ashes. The small, windowless space couldn't have been more than 8 by 6 feet. No furniture, no outlets, just a cement floor, insulation stapled to the inner wall, and one name, Tyler Mercer, scratched into the drywall with what looked like a paperclip or key, carved deep, over and over. Rachel stepped inside, ducking under a rusted ventilation pipe. Ace hesitated, then followed, his nails tapping lightly on the concrete. He sniffed the corners, ears up, tail still. No bark, no growl, just alert. The room felt wrong in every direction. Wrong temperature, wrong purpose. It didn't belong in a school. She ran her hand along the wall, feeling for anything loose. In the far corner, her fingers brushed against a small piece of denim torn, child-sized, wedged beneath the baseboard. She used her pen to pry it free. Blood, dried, faded, but unmistakable. Rachel placed it into an evidence bag and stepped back out, her head pounding. What had they done here? Back at the station, she reviewed everything again, this time with new eyes. Tyler Mercer disappeared in 2005 at age 11. Older brother, Sean Mercer. No official report filed until 4 days later. The story at the time was that Tyler had run away after an argument. No note, no sightings, no trace. The investigation never went deeper, because no one wanted it to. Rachel now believed Tyler had seen something he was never supposed to witness. Maybe he spoke up. Maybe he told Ron. Maybe that's what started it all. And now they had his name carved into a secret room, a scrap of his blood-stained clothing, and 2 sets of bones, one adult, one child recovered from a buried septic tank behind the house where Ron had been living. The pieces were lining up, not fast, not clear, but they were coming together like something you don't want to finish, like a puzzle you regret starting once the picture begins to make sense. She needed confirmation, and she needed to talk to Principal Everett Miles. Miles still worked at the school district. Not as a principal anymore, he'd taken a promotion 5 years earlier, and now sat on the school board, a local figurehead, respected, polished, the kind of man who shook hands at parades and donated to food drives. Rachel found him in his office at the administration building. He greeted her with a smooth, rehearsed smile and a handshake just firm enough to feel sincere. "Officer Hayes, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Rachel didn't sit. "I'm reopening the Ron Porter case." Miles tilted his head, smile flickering. "That was years ago. He was a janitor, correct? He disappeared without a trace in 2017. You filed the incident report about him accessing student records after hours." He leaned back. "That sounds familiar. He was acting oddly, snooping around places he didn't belong. We followed procedure. You were his supervisor." "Yes. You were also the last person to see him alive." Miles's smile faded, just slightly. "I wasn't aware of that." Rachel pulled out the photo the staff group shot with Ron, Miles, and Sean Mercer all lined up. "Do you remember this boy?" Miles looked at it, then gave a tight nod. "Yes, Mercer. Troubled family. The younger one ran away, I believe. Sad case." "Tyler Mercer didn't run away. He was 11. His brother says he vanished. I found a hidden room in the old school boiler area with Tyler's name carved into the wall." Miles didn't blink. "I'm not sure what you're suggesting, officer." "I'm not suggesting," Rachel said flatly. "I'm investigating." He stood slowly. "Then I hope you find what you're looking for." Rachel left the building feeling like she'd just walked through smoke. Miles hadn't cracked, hadn't panicked, but something in his tone was too rehearsed, too still, like someone who'd spent years practicing what not to say. She sat in her car, hands on the wheel, staring out at the school district sign. She didn't have enough to arrest him. Not yet. But she had enough to dig deeper. She needed someone who knew the old school layout before the renovations. Someone who'd seen where the walls used to be. That night, she returned to Evelyn Callahan's home. The retired teacher was sitting on her porch, wrapped in a quilt, a cup of tea resting on a wicker table beside her. "You're working late," Evelyn said softly. "I need your help." Rachel laid the blueprint of the school on the table and pointed to the boiler room. "This is the current layout, but the wall I found, the hidden one, it's not on the plans." Evelyn studied the drawing, brows tightening. That space wasn't always there. After the 2006 remodel, they covered the old equipment room. Said it was too expensive to remove, so they sealed it up. Did anyone have access to it? Not officially. But Ron used to store tools in there. He liked having a space of his own. Said the main janitor's closet was too exposed. "Do you remember anything unusual happening around that time? Any kids suddenly transferred? Teachers leaving without notice?" Evelyn hesitated. "There was one boy," she said finally. "Tyler Mercer. Sweet kid, quiet. Came to school with bruises sometimes. I reported it, but..." Rachel leaned forward. "But?" "They said it was being handled. I never saw him again." She paused, eyes misty. "And then Ron stopped coming to work." Rachel reached across the table and gently took the woman's hand. "Thank you," she said. "You've helped more than you know." Driving home, Rachel played the conversation over and over. Somewhere in all of this was the missing link. The reason a janitor and a child both disappeared. The reason Principal Miles kept smiling like nothing ever happened. She glanced in the rearview mirror. Ace was curled in the back seat, one eye half open. "We're not done, buddy," she whispered. "Not even close." Rachel sat alone in her kitchen just after midnight, the file folder still open on the counter beside a cold cup of decaf. The name etched on the back of the door kept circling her mind, Tyler Mercer. Not typed, not signed, carved. Like a whisper in stone from a child who knew he might be forgotten, Ace was curled by the back door, half asleep, his ears twitching at every shift of her breath. He always knew when her thoughts were too loud to sleep through. She turned the page in the file and stared at the school's original blueprint again. The secret room didn't exist on any current diagram. It had been sealed, scrubbed, erased, but not entirely. She picked up her phone and dialed. Sean Mercer didn't sound surprised to hear from her. He agreed to meet her the next morning at a diner just off the county highway. One of those places with red booths, faded pie boards, and waitresses who called everyone honorable. Rachel arrived first. Sean pulled in 5 minutes later, walking stiffly like someone used to watching shadows. He slid into the booth across from her, nodded at the coffee she ordered for him without asking. "You found something," he said. She didn't waste time. "There's a sealed room beneath the school. Your brother's name was carved inside it." Sean stared down at his cup. "I figured. You knew? I had nightmares for years. About walls that couldn't breathe. About him calling out and nobody hearing. But it was always just a feeling. No proof. No one listened back then." Rachel slid a clear bag across the table, the torn scrap of denim with dried blood. He blinked hard, his jaw clenched. "Is that? We'll get it tested. But I already know." He nodded slowly, then looked her in the eyes. "Do you want to know what really happened?" They drove to the old Mercer house together. It was boarded up now. Bank-owned. The front lawn was yellow and brittle, like the house had exhaled and given up. Inside, Sean led her through the side door, down into a basement that smelled of mildew and thyme. "There was this night," he said, voice flat. "Tyler came home shaking. He wouldn't say what he saw, just kept asking if Ron was okay. I asked what he meant. He said he saw the principal and another man yelling at Ron. Said they were mad about the room. Said Ron was going to ruin everything." Rachel kept still. Next morning, Tyler left for school like normal. He never came home. Sean's voice cracked slightly. "I told Mom. She told me to stop imagining things. Dad wasn't around. And when Ron disappeared the next week, I knew. They took them both." Rachel placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You were just a kid. I still remember everything. That's the worst part." Back at the precinct, Rachel typed her supplemental report slowly. She knew what she was building now. A case not just of murder, but of long-buried institutional cover-up. Tyler wasn't just a missing boy. Ron wasn't just a janitor. They were witnesses. Silenced. And if she didn't push this forward, they'd be forgotten again. She pulled up the district records. There it was, Principal Everett Miles had overseen construction and security updates in 2006, the same year the hidden room was sealed. Contractors listed. No permits for demolition. Just a vague invoice labeled Utility Reconfiguration. Du Combinant. She printed the documents and drove to county records to request contractor interviews. The woman at the desk, probably in her 60s, squinted at the microfilm printout. "You're digging deep," she said. Rachel offered a tight smile. That's where the truth tends to hide. Later that day, she returned to the school. This time with a warrant. The school was in session, but the superintendent cooperated. The principal's office was now a guidance counselor's room. Nobody suspected what used to be under their feet. With a small crew and a camera, she descended again into the boiler area. Ace followed at her heel. The wall was still ajar where she'd found the name. They brought in a forensic light and scanned the entire room. The UV glow revealed dozens of fingerprints, all small. Children. At the far end of the wall, near the vent, they found something wedged deep in the grate. A spiral notebook, mostly dissolved by mold. But the front cover still bore a name in childish handwriting. Tyler Mercer, my real journal. Rachel held it like glass. That night, Rachel met with the assistant district attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Helen Brooks who'd worked the justice system long enough to know when something stank beneath the paperwork. She read the notes, studied the photo, looked at the denim scrap, and the blood report. Then, finally, the notebook. "We can't try a ghost, Rachel," Helen said. "But if we can tie Miles to that room, if he knew what was happening and helped cover it up, we can nail him." "He buried them alive in silence," Rachel replied. That's worse than killing them. Helen nodded slowly. You want my support? I'll give it. But we need to move before he smells smoke. Rachel stood. I've got one last visit to make. At dawn the next day, Rachel drove out to a gated neighborhood just west of town. She parked in front of a large brick home with trimmed hedges and a U.S. flag flapping on a polished pole. Principal Everett Miles answered the door in a robe, surprised but composed. Officer Hayes. We need to talk, she said. Ace stood beside her, unblinking. I assume this isn't a courtesy call. No, she said, but it's the only one you're going to get. And for the first time since she'd started this case, Rachel saw something flicker in his eyes. Not arrogance, not calm, fear. The truth was closer than ever, and it wasn't going back underground. Rachel didn't wait for Everett Miles to invite her in. She stepped past him into the tiled foyer, Ace right beside her. The former principal hesitated a second before shutting the door with a slow click. The house smelled like pine-scented cleaner and expensive denial. Miles cleared his throat. You can't just barge into someone's home without a... I have a signed warrant, Rachel said, flashing it. And if you're wondering whether we've connected the hidden room in the school to your name, we have. She held up a copy of the old maintenance log, his signature at the bottom, authorizing the sealed utility closet renovation in June 2006. Funny thing, she continued. No one can recall who requested the closure, but the original blueprint has your initials. And that room just so happened to hold evidence tied to 2 missing persons, both of whom were last seen under your supervision. Miles rubbed a hand over his mouth. You're reaching, officer. No. I'm remembering. She pulled a folded photo from her pocket, one he'd hoped was forgotten. Staff photo, back row, Ron Porter, Everett, Sean Mercer, and a 10-year-old Tyler standing awkwardly in front. This boy? She said. His name is Tyler Mercer. His brother finally came forward. He remembers everything, the threats, the bruises, the silence. Miles opened his mouth, then closed it. Rachel stepped closer. You can either speak now, or let the state piece it together without your version. Back at the station, Rachel typed fast. Her report was growing into something too big for the county to ignore. She included timelines, blueprints, recovered items from the school, and the partial transcription of Tyler's notebook, which was now with the lab for preservation. The pages that survived had a child's spelling, but the meaning came through loud and clear. Mr. R told me not to go in there anymore. Said it wasn't safe. Said the man with the blue tie didn't like me asking questions. I heard yelling. I think someone was crying. I think it was a grown-up. I think it was him. It didn't name Miles outright. But the blue tie had become something of a legend. Rachel had already spoken to 2 retired teachers who remembered Miles' wardrobe like it was yesterday. Always blue, always pressed, always polished. She didn't need him to confess now. The walls were closing in, with or without him. The next day, she got a call from the forensics lab. The blood on the denim? A familial match to Sean Mercer. The bones pulled from the tank? One set matched Tyler. The other, Ron Porter. Confirmation. After 6 years of silence, Rachel sat in her cruiser outside the old Mercer house and let the news sink in. Ace nudged her elbow gently from the back seat. I know, she whispered, voice low. We're almost there. Later that afternoon, Rachel walked into the county prosecutor's office with her full report. ADA Helen Brooks met her with narrowed eyes and a half-finished Diet Coke. We can move forward, she said, flipping through the pages. But it's going to get ugly. He's not going to go quietly. Let him fight, Rachel said. We've got bones, blood, and motive. Brooks nodded. The motive's the only thing that'll be tricky. Rachel raised an eyebrow. He buried a child. That's motive enough. He didn't do it alone, Brooks said. You know that. Rachel exhaled. I know. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the water tower on the edge of Willow Glen, Rachel sat on her back porch with Ace at her feet and a cup of black coffee going cold in her hands. She thought of Ron, not just how he died, but how he lived. Quiet, watchful, probably overlooked. Just a janitor, the kind of man who gets thanked politely at retirement parties, but never really seen. But he'd seen everything. He saw what no one wanted to talk about. He saw a child in danger, and he stepped into the fire for it. Rachel felt a lump form in her throat. So many people had stayed quiet. Parents, teachers, officials. But Ron Porter hadn't, and neither would she. The next morning, Rachel walked into the school board meeting with her badge around her neck, 2 uniformed officers at her side, and a folder of evidence tucked under her arm. Everett Miles sat at the long oak table, surrounded by colleagues who had no idea what storm was about to hit. She stepped to the podium. The room went still. "I'm Officer Rachel Hayes, Willow Glen Police Department," she said calmly. "I'm here to serve an arrest warrant for Everett Miles. Charges include obstruction of justice, concealment of evidence, and accessory to the murder of a minor." Gasps. A chair scraped. Everett stood, pale and stiff. "You have no proof." Rachel motioned for the officers. "Tell that to the bones in the septic tank. Tell it to Tyler Mercer's blood on the school walls. Tell it to Ron Porter's notebook." Everett opened his mouth and shut it. He didn't resist. As they cuffed him, Rachel looked around the room. The shocked faces, the whispered murmurs, the shifting eyes of people who wondered, "Did I know? Did I miss it? Did I help hide it just by staying silent?" She didn't say a word as they walked Everett out. Ace waited for her outside, sitting calmly in the sundae. She gave him a scratch behind the ears. "Good boy," she whispered. Justice hadn't been served yet, but the ground had shifted. And sometimes, that's how healing begins, when you finally stop pretending the ground beneath you was ever solid to begin with. They said nothing on the walkout. Everett Miles didn't protest as the officers led him down the steps of the Willow Glen School District building in handcuffs. He didn't look left or right. Not at the local press huddled behind the barricades, not at the parents whispering on their phones, and not at Rachel, who stood with her arms crossed, watching the man who had buried truth beneath polished shoes and PTA smiles. The moment wasn't loud. No shouting, no breaking news van screeching around the corner, just quiet disbelief. Exactly the way silence had worked for years. Rachel turned away and got into her cruiser. Ace sat in the back seat, ears forward, waiting for her like always. As she pulled away from the curb, her phone buzzed. Text from Ada Brooks. "Need you at Town Hall tonight. Public forum. People want answers." Of course they did. By 7 p.m., the town hall was standing room only. Folding chairs lined every wall. The smell of coffee and nervous sweat hung in the air. Residents murmured in waves. Some looked angry, others confused, a few visibly afraid. Rachel stood in the back corner, reviewing the timeline in her head. Ron Porter disappeared in 2017. Tyler Mercer, 2005. Room sealed, 2006. Principal Miles promoted, 2020. 2 bodies, 1 system. Too many people who looked the other way. Brooks took the stage and offered the usual: transparency, ongoing investigation, legal process. Then she invited Rachel up. Rachel walked to the microphone, heels echoing in the hall like small hammers. She didn't bring notes. She brought the truth. "Some of you knew Ron Porter," she began. "He was the janitor at Willow Glen Middle School. He disappeared 6 years ago. No foul play was confirmed at the time, but this week, his remains were recovered along with the remains of a young boy named Tyler Mercer, who vanished 12 years before that." The room went still. Both were hidden beneath a property once rented by Ron. We now know Ron was trying to protect Tyler, trying to tell someone. He left behind notes, evidence, warnings, and he paid for it with his life. Someone gasped. Rachel looked out over the crowd. "Everett Miles is in custody. He's being charged with obstruction, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. But I'm going to say something that doesn't fit neatly into a police report." She paused, taking a breath. Silence helped bury these people. Not just one man's decisions, but an entire culture of looking away, of assuming someone else would speak up. And I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm just here to make sure we stop doing that. Today, no one clapped, no one moved. Just long, heavy quiet. And for once, that silence meant something different. The next morning, Rachel pulled up to the Mercer house. The bank had started the foreclosure process again, but but she had special permission to walk the property one last time. Sean was already there, standing at the edge of the dried lawn, hands in his jacket pockets. He didn't say hello, just nodded. Ada Brooks offered to help you with restitution paperwork, Rachel said gently. There are victim funds available. Sean shook his head. That money won't change what happened. No, she admitted, but it's something. They walked the yard together, stepping around broken sprinklers and old leaves. When they reached the side gate, Sean stopped. Tyler used to climb this fence like it was Mount Everest, he said, smiling just slightly. He'd wave to the neighbors, even the ones who never waved back. Rachel glanced toward the street. A man raking leaves gave a tight smile and a nod. She didn't recognize him, but he looked guilty, the kind of guilt that grows roots over time. Do you want a grave marker for him? Rachel asked. Somewhere official? Sean's voice caught. No, I want his name cleared. I want them to take Runaway off the record. He didn't run. He was taken. Rachel nodded. We'll make it right. That afternoon, Rachel visited Evelyn Callahan. The retired teacher greeted her with a warm hug and hot chamomile tea. They sat on the porch, the autumn breeze tossing fallen leaves around their shoes. I saw your speech on the news, Evelyn said. I never thought I'd live to see someone held accountable. I wish I could say we got them all. Evelyn looked down. Do you think Ron knew he wouldn't survive it? Rachel thought for a long moment. I think he hoped someone like you would remember him. They sat in silence after that. Not uncomfortable, just shared. By the end of the week, a new plaque had been installed at Willow Glen Middle School, near the gym entrance. In memory of Ron Porter and Tyler Mercer, may the truth they carried never be buried again. Students passed it without knowing much yet, but teachers stopped. Parents paused, and a few older staff members stood still longer than the rest. At home that night, Rachel let Ace up on the couch for the first time. He didn't hesitate, just jumped up, curled beside her, and sighed deeply like the weight of the whole town had lifted just a little. She leaned back, eyes closing, hand resting on his side. Justice had cost too much, but it had finally come up for air. The day of the memorial was cool, overcast, and quiet, the kind of day that didn't ask for attention but felt like it deserved a pause. The plaque at the edge of the school courtyard was polished to a soft sheen, surrounded by fresh marigolds planted by the 8th grade gardening club. Rachel stood to the side, not in uniform, just a simple black sweater and jeans. She wasn't there to be an officer today. She was just someone who had listened when others hadn't. Across the courtyard, Sean Mercer adjusted his collar and stepped up to the small podium. His voice was even, soft but strong enough to carry. My little brother wasn't a troublemaker. He liked space shuttles and peanut butter sandwiches. He cried when our goldfish died, and he trusted people he shouldn't have had to question. Today, we give him back his name. He glanced at Rachel. Their eyes met, and she nodded. This plaque doesn't fix everything, but it says he mattered. That's more than we had for a long time. There was no applause, just silence, a respectful kind. Later that afternoon, Rachel walked the edge of the school property with Ace at her side. She traced the fence line out of habit, even though the investigation was over. Habits don't break easy after 20 years on the force. Ace stopped beside a patch of earth where the grass had never grown right. She crouched next to him, brushing her fingers over the disturbed soil. The septic tank had been removed, replaced by a small flower bed. The janitorial closet that led to the hidden room had been sealed for good, the school opting to convert it into a library annex. But here, under open sky, things had finally been unearthed. Not just bones, but truth and grief. And the cost of looking away. Rachel stood, brushing off her jeans. She didn't need to stay long. The town would remember now. 2 weeks later, Everett Miles took a plea deal. No media circus, no drawn-out trial. Just quiet paperwork, sealed statements, and a man in a tailored suit led away in handcuffs. He'd served time, but the deeper victory was never about punishment. It was about exposure. The town had learned something. About institutions, about silence, about the power of a janitor's courage and a child's carved name. Rachel didn't attend the sentencing. She didn't need to see it. Justice had already happened in the place that mattered most in the hearts of the people who'd chosen to finally stop ignoring the shadows. On a chilly Thursday evening, Rachel visited Evelyn Callahan again. They sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, drinking hot cider and listening to the distant hum of kids playing soccer down the block. Evelyn smiled. "You ever wonder why it took so long?" Rachel nodded. "All the time. And what do you tell yourself?" Rachel thought for a second. "That truth takes root like a seed. Some people water it, some try to bury it, but it grows anyway." Evelyn looked down at her cup. "I spent years convincing myself I hadn't seen what I saw, that I'd misremembered, that it wasn't my place to speak up." Rachel placed a hand on hers. "You remembered when it counted." That weekend, Rachel took Ace up to the old trails behind Willow Creek, where she and her husband used to hike before he passed. The sun filtered through the trees, casting golden lines across the leaf-covered path. Ace ran ahead, pausing to sniff tree trunks and chase scents only he understood. For the first time in weeks, Rachel let herself breathe. There was no next step, no suspect to chase, no body to recover, no statement to draft. Just air, and light, and the soft hush of wind moving through trees that had stood longer than any lie. She found a bench at the overlook and sat, watching the valley below fade into evening. Ace returned, tongue out, tail wagging as he lay beside her. She scratched behind his ears. "You let us hear," she whispered. He thumped his tail once in reply. Back in town, the school installed a new plaque beside the original one. It read, "Dedicated to the students who trusted adults to protect them. May we always be worthy of that trust." Rachel passed it a few days later on her morning walk. She didn't stop. She didn't need to. Because the work wasn't just done. It was finally remembered. Thank you for staying with us through this story. We know it wasn't always easy, but sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we need the most. Now I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done if you were Rachel? Would you have chased the truth, even when it was buried beneath years of silence? Let us know in the comments below. And until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and never stop listening.